conversation.
NRL controversial conversation. I don't know. I'm trying to come up with a name for it. But you can watch the previous ones on the new playlist on YouTube, where we've cut these specific conversations.
Put them up. That was good.
And so this week's one is, drumroll please, which NRL team do you hate the most, Dan?
Yes. I'll start off.
Yeah, you go for it.
Yeah, I'll go for... I can't go past our friends in the eastern suburbs, John, the Roosters. It sort of goes back to... obviously, I'm a Bulldogs supporter, John, and when I was in high school, that was in sort of the early to mid 2000s. That was I think it's fair to say they were the two best teams of the early 2000s era, John. And that was the big rivalry. That was the schoolyard rivalry that we always had banter about. You had that situation where the Roosters won the premiership in 2002 after the Bulldogs were stripped of all their points, being found to be cheating the salary cap. And then the Bulldogs sort of got their ultimate revenge in 2004. So the Bulldogs really had that last laugh of when I was sort of in high school there, John, and they had the last laugh. But unfortunately, since then, the Roosters have just completely obliterated the Bulldogs and won 3 premierships since then.
Stolen a bunch of their players.
And the Bulldogs haven't won anything since then. So I'm glad that happened when it did, John, when I was at school. And, so I can't go past the Roosters and, you mentioned stole the players. Then the Roosters went and just signed a bunch of Bulldogs players after the 2004 premiership. So they signed Willie Mason, they signed Mark O'Mealy, they signed Sonny Bill Williams, they signed Braithen Astor, they signed Nate Miles. So that's a lot that they picked out of the Bulldogs there, John. And of course, John, we always get the stories of the salary cap sombrero. And again, John, I put it out there a week or two ago. I would have thought, and I know a lot of it is jokes on the Matty Johns show from people like, Brian Fletcher just having a laugh on the Matty Johns show and Matty Johns. And look, fair enough, I get that there's a lot of humour in this, John. But, I mean, this sort of scuttlebutt annoyed Politis to come out and say that other clubs are jealous. So Politis clearly wasn't taking it as a joke. Yeah. But I just wonder, John, and I said it before, there's nothing stopping somebody, and I think it's fair to say that there's more scuttlebutt around them than any other team on this issue, John. So I'm just waiting for someone at that club to come out and say, look, and they're more than welcome, no one's stopping them, come out and say there's no truth to this. This has never happened. This is slander against our club. How dare you come out and accuse us of constantly cheating, even though sometimes you're half joking. That option continues to be available to them, John, and they continue to not take that option. But anyway,
one of the top 3 salary cap raiders in history, Brian Wardren, said if the NRL announced a thing where you could come out and admit you were raiding the salary cap and there'd be no penalty, all 16 clubs would do it. He was on television basically saying that everyone would do it. He admitted 2 years before Melbourne got caught that they were raiding the salary cap on television.
But anyway, John, they're a very successful club. Maybe I'm a bit jealous of their success, but they're my most hated club.
Everybody hates the Roosters, and one of the things about the Roosters is their crowd attendances and memberships used to be so terrible, and they're actually growing with success. They had so many off-field dramas. It gives everyone something to talk about. They're not the Sydney Poosters because Roosters rhymes with poo. They're Sydney Poosters because Nate Miles pooped in a corridor. That's when the Poosters really came out. The following year, the 2 Toyota Cup guys were at the same hotel and thought it'd be funny to emulate Nate Miles as a joke. Now, the Nate Miles one was I felt so bad for the guy. I can't remember who it was, but they were going through it. It was Nate Miles had gastro. He was really sick. He happens to sleep naked. He'd taken some sleeping pills. He woke up needing to go to the toilet. He was in a strange place, didn't really know where he was. Walked through the door, the front door instead of the toilet door, accidentally. He sleeps naked all the time. Door closed behind him. He was naked. At that exact time, up the hall, our family was leaving to go on their further holiday. Came out and found a giant hulking man with diarrhea and gastro and happened to explode. But the next year when the 2 NYC players thought it would be funny they just became the Poosters. And that's it's easy. They're an easy target not because of like like they don't have any. These things happen. They actually do happen to the Roosters, you know. And yeah, like I can understand why everyone hates the Roosters. A bunch of my friends are Roosters fans. Actually, one of them, when he was younger, that I went to high school with, he was a Parramatta fan when I first met him, and then he changed to the Kiwis because he's half Kiwi, the New Zealand Warriors when he's half Kiwi. And then he started hanging out with like this loud friend that we have, Big Chris, that's a massive Roosters fan. And my friend Seth said, like after a few years, I'm like, when he told me to change to the Roosters, he's like, you got to try hanging out with Chris and not be a Roosters fan. But I hang out with Chris for the past 25 years as well, man. I'm still a Dragons fan.
So are they your team as well, John?
The Dragons are my team. So.
Oh no, sorry. Who's your most hated team?
No, they're not. See, Roosters were my easy target, but actually, and there's a long history there, Melbourne are my most hated team.
Right, okay.
So obviously it stems from 1999. Okay, the Jamie Ainscough penalty try.
Yeah.
Now, Dragons fans will often say the only reason Melbourne won in 1999 is because of the penalty try. It's true, but it's also a penalty try. Penalty try is awarded when there is a penalty that prevents the scoring of a try that would have scored the try. The try was fair, okay? And the Dragons were up and lost it. They basically pulled the 2023 Panthers, Broncos 24 years before Broncos did. Dragons were ahead and lost the match. So it stems from that. But one of the things I hate about Melbourne is they brought wrestling. It's well documented. They brought wrestling into rugby league. Okay. Now, people call it wrestling, and they go on about how it's wrestling because they're a little bit ignorant. What Melbourne actually did was they employed John Donahue, who was one of the first 7 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts in Australia, as their wrestling coach. And throughout the years, we have seen chicken wings, crushes, I can't remember what, the hip drops, all of these.
All this has been introduced by them.
All come from Melbourne, and these names are given to them by commentators and rugby league things who may want to make them illegal. But when a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu person looks at it, a chicken wing is an Americana or a Kimura. You know, a hip drop is, I don't know, they use a Japanese name, but it's a specific type of takedown. The crusher tackle is like, you know, these things. We have names for them. I don't know the names of Jiu-Jitsu moves, by the way, just so you know. But they are there, and they stem from John Donahue. I'm not bagging John Donahue. He's an amazing coach, an amazing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, it's not his fault. He's just doing his job.
Yeah, he was hired, and so... Yeah. You look at Melbourne, and they brought this wrestling into the game that made the ruck slow. They made it what people call boring because of all of this. And that has, to this day, created a situation in which the NRL is continually changing rules to make the game more exciting, which I think make the game more stupid. Like the 6 again rule, which I've talked about before, where I've been to a game that was, you know, one team gets a roll on with 6 agains, they're up by 15 or 16 or whatever, and then the other team gets a few, and then they catch up, and then they're up by 2, and then the other team gets the roll on, and it goes like they create a whole bunch of high-scoring games, which I know are highlight reels, but it takes away from the tactical element of the game, and it all stems from this wrestling. Yeah,
and further to that, John, obviously they're responsible for the biggest salary cap cheating that's been found in the history of the game. And they didn't show any real remorse for that.
No, I've got that as notes too.
Yeah, they doubled down on that. There was no apology.
Remember they did that ridiculous press conference?
Yeah, where they all walked out there and they made out like the world was against them when they just got found out for cheating.
They were cheating and they made it like everyone else's fault.
Yeah.
So and then they still claim the title. So this year they had some anniversary thing and they had replica trophies. And they had the 2007, 2009 replica trophies there as if they still claim the titles. I don't expect them to give their premiership rings back, like the individual players, but as a club, like as a team, as an organisation, the fact that they still claim those titles and say, like, you know, we're however many time premiership winner, it just makes me hate them more.
Yeah.
And then they justified it. And Phil Gould was on the Footy Show trying to justify. He had a discussion with David Gallop, which I think was a stitch up on David Gallop, where they tried to justify because they released all these names of players that they had let go, and they were releasing, like, saying all these juniors and stuff. And Phil Gould went through them all. Like, I think Dallas Johnson was one. Like, there was all these Melbourne junior rep players that were scattered throughout the league playing for other teams that had come through the Melbourne system and moved to other teams. And they tried to justify it by this. Like, we didn't cheat, we let go of all these people. But they also bought guys like Michael Crocker and Brett Finch. You know? Like, they also, there was a list, also a laundry list of players that were rep players that they brought in.
They bought more as well. It wasn't just the players that they brought through. I mean, there was no way that a team with, Cameron Smith, Billy Slater, Cooper Cronk and Greg Inglis were ever going to be under the salary cap.
The fact that they only let go of Greg Inglis out of those big four was also a big slap in the face to the rest of the world too. But the last thing about Melbourne that I want to go into is actually speaks to the Dally M discussion before, the negative connotations of Billy Slater's games. Now, twice in history they have had to change rules specifically because of Billy Slater. Mm-hmm. Okay? One of the times was when he fly kicked David Klemmer in the face. Yeah. And David Klemmer got penalised. Because he touched a player in the air. Now, Billy Slater ran forward. David Klemmer stopped. You can watch the footage. It's horrifying. David Klemmer stopped. Billy Slater ran forward and leapt for the ball with a fly kick. He stuck his leg out. He struck David Klemmer. Yeah. David Klemmer standing still. And because of the rules at the time, David Klemmer got penalised. Yeah. Right? It was when he was playing for the Bulldogs.
Yeah.
The other time was leading with the knees to prevent tries. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed to do that anymore. And on multiple occasions, he slid in with his knees. You're not allowed to lead with the foot or knee anymore, which is good. Slid in with his knees on a player that had already scored a try, or he had no chance of stopping, and struck the player. Multiple occasions in the back, in the side, in the head, everywhere, leading with his knees. And they had to change the rules to accommodate for this behaviour. And that just goes back to the whole team with their wrestling and chicken wings and hip drops and, this kind of thing. So this is why I hate the Melbourne Storm more than any other team. Because they really, if you want to go into how an immortal changed the game, Melbourne Storm is, what's the opposite of an immortal,
They're the demons. Immortal, yeah.
They're the mortals of the thing.
Immortal, yeah. Yeah, well, that's the thing about Billy Slater, John. I mean, he's obviously a very sharp brain in the game. We're seeing that now with his coaching of the Queensland Maroons. He's won 2 Origin series out of 2. Very sharp mind in the game. As a player, I think him and Darren Lockyer would be the 2 best fullbacks that I saw play. But there was that, we're honest here, there was that aspect of his game that you didn't like. The sliding in at players after they score tries, as you said, with the knees. As you mentioned, things like, kicking Klemmer in the face, or putting his boot in Klemmer's face. There was that really sort of ugly aspect of his game, and that needs to be pointed out. And maybe look I don't think that Slater... I don't think he should be an immortal. Not specifically for that reason, but because I just don't think his record's good enough, and there's other players above him. But if you were to really specifically consider him, well then maybe something like that would come into play. The fact that he had that nasty side to his game, and count against him when it comes to the crunch in a discussion like that.
In reality, massive parts of his game were dirty. The definition of dirty. Yeah. Sliding with your knees in to prevent tries is dirty.
Yeah. And that's not good for the kids watching the game. Yeah. That's not good for the game. That dirty side of the game is not good for the game.
Like that Origin chip and chase will forever go down as one of the greatest highlights in the history of the world, even though, offside. But there's still they never highlight injuries, They never make highlight reels of injuries, and things like the sliding knees injured people. They don't do highlight reels of times when Billy Slater slid into the back of players who were going for tries and then left them writhing on the ground in pain.
Yeah. That's right.
But you can go find them if you look, and that's
unfortunate, isn't it? Because as I say, he's and you hear his commentary is brilliant as well. He's a brilliant commentator. He's a brilliant coach. He was a brilliant player. But unfortunately, there's this side to him that we need to point out. And it does count against him when you look back at his whole career.
And that Billy Slater is just the, what you could say worst of a bad bunch, because all of the Melbourne club and organisation is like that. Mm. They get Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt in to train them in wrestling, and then he starts teaching them Americanas and body control with figure four locks that are like shoulder. Wrestlers, jiu-jitsu guys, submission grappling guys, pancration, all those kind of guys, like me, we all have rotator cuff issues. All of them. And rugby league players have had rotator cuff issues, like, historically. But I've actually read a study about the increase in rotator cuff issues since the introduction of more wrestling into the game. Mm. Because it is a thing. I know so many jiu-jitsu guys who can't raise their arms above their head because a figure four lock, whether it's up is Americana and down is a Kimura. Yeah. A figure four lock, it tears your shoulder. Little bit every time. And they introduced that chicken wing tackle into the game, which is just a figure four lock. And it's Melbourne did it. And then when that got banned, they found another one. And then when that got banned, they found another one. They always find another one. They've always been my most hated team since 1999, obviously. But they just keep giving me more and more.
They've given you plenty more reasons, John, since then.
But I give it to the Roosters too.
Yes.
There's now 17 teams in the NRL, and I hate 15 of them. The Dolphins haven't done anything to me yet.
Oh, you mean you like 15 of them?
No, I hate 15 of them. I like the Dragons.
Sorry, yeah. Sorry,
and I like the Dolphins. The Dolphins haven't done anything to me yet. I have my book of feuds, all right? Yeah.